do we, as a family, shape the opinions of people around us on how to treat and view our children?
Next question. It's both a yes and a no question. Answer. Yes, because how we interact with society matters. Yeah, as a parent, I make sure that anybody who's going to interact with my child, first and foremost, I, as a mother, I'm comfortable with you being around my children. Something I would do with both, whether they were neurotypical or neurodiverse in the first place. And then I'll also watch to make sure my child is also comfortable with you. Yeah. So they have already shaped the opinion of how you're going to interact with my child.
Yeah.
And then there is that security I put around my child because I know exactly her perception and understanding of the world. The way we've raised our children, they do not know to date, maybe because they cannot comprehend it, that they have a disability. They consider themselves children. Yeah, they will want to play with the rest. They will want to be invited for parties like everyone else, and therefore we only block them accessing others if already the person is biased. Yeah, so that is where we create the opinion. But as their mother, what I do is basically ensure that they can have the seamless interaction with society, where I don't have to tell you even before you interact with them that they have an intellectual disability. You'll find out for yourself, and then based on how you react determines your relationship with them. That is the yes part. The no part is already the society has its own opinions. Yeah, they have their own opinions on how our children should be treated. So you'll find somebody who does not want a child with intellectual disability around them, somebody who has a problem with your children touching their things or even being in their houses or anywhere near their own children. So when that happens, then you know there's nothing you can do about that opinion, and simply then put a barrier between those people and your children. And sometimes we don't even have to do it. Our children are very perceptive. They actually know people who will welcome them and people who will shun them, and they totally avoid those who will shun them, because how you treat them from the day one creates the relationship you have with them going forward. So you'll find that from experience, I know there are people my daughter has never talked to, and they're in her life for the last 8 years. Yeah, ever since she learned to talk or even interact with people. Even if that person came today now, that now they know my child has intellectual disabilities, has autism and ADHD, and now tries to be their friend, my daughter will not be bothered. Because how you treated me at the beginning does not give you room for me to give you a second chance. They don't have that of, you bullied them when they're small, you were mean to them when they were small. That continues, and they have created their own opinions. You were nice to them when they are small, so if you are nice to them, then you turn to be mean. They cannot comprehend the change. So they form their own opinions also of how the society will treat them and how they will treat the society around them.
So I need us to move a little bit from like maybe the urban setting and into the ushago setting, right? Where I'll come ask you to employ my son or my daughter. You want to employ her or him, and they have a disability. What has been your experience like?
Okay, on a personal level, it has not been an experience, but being in the center of advocacy, it's something we get to deal with. One thing is that in the rural setting, we've not found anyone who is going for employment. Most of them literally become self-employed by becoming farmers. Some become, they go after their interests. Unlike the urban setting where it's a bit protected, the rural setting has been a bit, as much as it has more biases, you find that the person has grown up with people who know them, who are probably their relatives in the whole village. And therefore they have a bit more confidence in what they are doing. Most of them that I have met are in agriculture. And the kind of agriculture they do, because they have so much detail to attention, has been where it's successful. It's very successful. I know somebody who lives in the urban center, but every Friday the son has to go to up country so that they can do their farming, because that's what they're comfortable with. When it comes to maybe employment, I've come across somebody who I've met one who's become a mechanic, another one who's become a welder, but nobody went out of their way to find them the jobs. It's because of their interests and the people who are willing to let them hang around, teach them slowly. They learn by sight and by copying, that they ended up being the mechanics and the welders. In Western Kenya, I've met a lot of fishermen who are from the intellectual disability community, simply because they have the patience. And it also goes to, maybe one day science will tell us why most of them are awake at night. and they love the peace and they connect with water a lot. So you find a lot of them working in that area as a community together. But unlike the urban area where we expect formal education or formal training, paperwork to back up your job, in the rural setting, it's been different and it's been better. So they have, those who are able to work have been able to work. Those who have not been able to work, on the other hand, it's been a burden to their families because they have to keep on protecting them. And then also the way it's portrayed out in the media. You know, I learned a long time ago that most media stories, as far as disability is concerned, have either two aspects: the pity me aspect or the ableism aspect. It's something that we expect anybody to do. When it's done by somebody with intellectual disability, we think that that's something that we should put on a podium, clap, and cheer on. I mean, they just achieved something that should be achieved on a normal day, despite the challenges there. So the stories that should be told have not been told. Yeah. And things that are normal and everyday events have been sat on because they don't bring out the pity factor and the ableism factor. So they end up being shunned. But otherwise, when it comes to employment, as difficult as it is, within the rural setting has been easier. When you come to the urban setting, because most of it is either corporate or institutional, we tend to shun away from having persons with intellectual disability. And I wouldn't blame the HR with this organization. One, because maybe unless disability exists in your personal space, most people don't know about it, or don't know how to interact with them. Then the ones who they have, their companies would want to do it as a CSR, but at arm's length. They don't want the liability within them. Unless you're doing something that is so extraordinary that you actually do it better than the neurodiverse, you find most corporates will not be willing to have or open that space. Recently, we've seen a lot of them trying to start opening that space for persons with disability because it's a tax cut. It's less taxes to them, and it's also some money back from the National Industrial Training Authority into their pockets. So it's a business decision because it's getting money to them, not because it is the right thing to do or this person has the right to employment. It has also been part of affirmative action. You know, I look at advertisement and women and persons with disability are encouraged to apply for these jobs. What they don't tell you is that the only disabilities they are willing to do are the ones that are physical and they won't limit your work. We've recently seen a big organization get sued and lose a court case for denying a person an interview because they did not provide the necessary software that this person needed to do that interview. So evening out the playing field. So if I need a certain equipment to get this job done, if I was an engineer, you would provide it. So why don't you provide it to me because it's also necessary for me to carry out that job that I'm qualified for? You don't find that within the urban sector. Also, the quagmire that is the law. You know, we say 9 points to the devil. There's so much that is undistinguished on the law. On one side, you're saying it's a benefit and you should employ persons with disability, but it doesn't tell you what level of disabilities or classify the different disabilities because they have different impacts. And two, on the other side, you find a person with intellectual and mental disability has no legal capacity. If you're employed, you have a legal contract to sign, but you have no legal capacity on the other hand. So it brings again a whole quagmire. Where do we put this operation at? When are we going to sort out this disparity between what the law says here and the other law says here? Then you find that because already there's a social bias, everybody thinks that people with intellectual disability should go into vocational jobs. So you find everybody who is trying to employ them or put them into working is trying to push them into that niche. Well, it's not where they should be.
So for those who are doing manual jobs, have you come across cases where people take advantage of them because they cannot distinguish currencies?
Oh yes. A lot of the times, unless they have a strict guardian who's watching over them, they are taken out. I think you don't even have to go very far. There's the story of the guy who was taken advantage of by Manchester United's SACCO, the SACCO that deals with matatus in Thika, where they told him, and because he wasn't smart enough to put it on contract, they got all the media effect of he's putting his money on the table, they're bringing in a matatu and he'll own the matatu at the end, and then the SACCO takes it away from him, and it's taken also all his savings with it. That is just one example of
Yeah.
And I know those who work, I've seen the legal officer within ADAT handling, who ADAT works with, who's Article 48 initiative, having to go to court or settle out of court where somebody worked for somebody for 17 years, but they kept on telling them, we're keeping your money for you. But the day that person decides, no, it's time for me to go home, you call the police on them and have them arrested for trespassing.
Oh.
And because they don't have the mental capacity to actually have this conversation with the police, they lose their money, they lose 17 years of their life, and they end up in jail.
Yeah.
And when the police present them in court, then you're sent for mental assessment. And then when you sent for mental assessment, because it's one of those badly done things, because one judge did it 20 years ago, we keep on doing it even when it's not necessary. You end up in a mental institution. Then again, it just becomes a bad spiral of one cycle after the other, because after the mental assessment, you're found not fit to stand trial, and then you're put in a mental institution, which again is against the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability. It also denies you your human rights, automatic your human right to be free and access to justice. So it just becomes a very bad scenario that keeps on spiraling.
Yeah.
Yeah.